The 48th annual meeting of the bank and the 39th meeting of its soft loan affiliate, the African Development Fund, has got underway in Marrakesh in Morocco with Africa's structural transformation as its focus. Godfrey Mutizwa spoke to African Development Bank Chief Economic and Vice President Professor Mthuli Ncube about resource dependence in Africa's major economies.
Structural transformation really is about expanding opportunity so that the greater part of our people in Africa can benefit from the economic opportunity which is being unleashed by the robust economic growth that we see. Right. So natural resources are at the core of this. Africa is discovering lots of natural resources in the extractive industry sector. And how then should we harness the revenues from this sector? Right. Some of these, there are some leakages in terms of illicit flows, yes. But where there are no leakages, some contracts are opaque and all of that. The revenues are not managed adequately. The capacity to collect taxes from the mining sector is weak and needs to be improved. These are some of the issues that we've been debating in terms of maximizing the impact of extractive industries.
What will be required to make this work, to make sure that governments play their role in terms of improving transparency around extracting these resources and also making sure that those revenues are collected and they are directed into the right areas?
It's about building capacity for governments. Okay. So the African Development Bank, we've got the African Legal Support Facility, which is meant to give governments capacity to negotiate contracts. Governments themselves must sign up to the Transparency Industry Initiative. That's very important. But also, we have the capacity to negotiate.
Can you force them?
You can't force them.
It would be nice if you could force them.
But of course,
this is vital.
But what we do is when we engage with these countries in terms of other support in other development areas, we do check if they've complied with the extractive industry initiative. They've signed up. It's very important. It's for the good of Africa. It's for the good of the countries. So we use that moral suasion when we give out loans as part of the strategy. But you can't really force countries. But I think the argument is compelling enough. Africa is losing a lot, and these countries could benefit a lot more by making sure that they adhere to transparency as a principle, they negotiate better contracts, and they've got the capacity to do so.
You must excuse me, of course, because I speak from the other wing, which tries to hold government accountable. So I always look for ways in which we can force them to do the right things. Let's talk about the concept of structural transformation in itself, because we know this is a touchy one. Africa went through structural adjustment programs with the IMF in the 1980s, and we know the results. Now, how do we make governments willing participants and also keep them in line?
Structural adjustment was a short-term measure, which was really a stabilization measure, if you think about it, which was very pro-markets, anti-big government, and that kind of thing. And we know that it didn't quite work well, at least in the short run. Structural transformation is actually about the long run. It's about the long term, and so it's about investing in infrastructure, sustainable infrastructure, roads, rail, energy, ports, everything that will facilitate movement and reduce the cost of doing business in Africa will fall under that. It's about investing in people, in human capital. If we're going to have 1 billion new people, additional people in Africa in the next 50 years, to take the population to 2.5 billion from the current 1.5 or so, of which half are young people by the way, below the age of 20, then vocational training for that use so that we can harness that demographic dividend, focusing on women and skills is critical. But also in trying to turn Africa into the factory of the world, the same way that China has been a factory of the world, Bangladesh to an extent, and other countries have been a factory of the world. The question is, how can Africa also become that, manage our labor markets, manage our investment climate, so that, and that will help diversify Africa's manufacturing sector, so that we can improve the quality of intra-Africa trade. So there's a lot to do here in terms of structural transformation, which will result in inclusive growth, because you've expanded sources of economic growth.
When is this program kicking off?
A structural transformation program. We look, in terms of the bank's 10-year strategy, we're already onto it.
How many countries have signed up?
Well, everyone, we assume, is signed up in Africa, and they believe in our strategy, which is focused on infrastructure investment, in focus on human capital development. It's focused on promoting entrepreneurship, the African entrepreneurs, the private sector.
Yeah.
It's focused on regional integration. It's focused on vocational education, because how do you build capacity without a vocational education? But also focus on the bank becoming an effective knowledge generator and knowledge broker.
Right.
We launched the bank strategy 2 weeks ago for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
We're already on to it. Every African country, I think, believes in what we're trying to do.
Sure. Let's speak about the agenda here. Of course, the 10-year strategy is one of the issues that you're focusing on. Give us a broad overview in terms of the main issues that you expect. When people speak about Marrakesh 2013, they will speak about what happened here.
Marrakesh 2013, the FDB annual meeting, is about Africa structural transformation, how to achieve that. So think about, we'll talk about leadership. How do we get visionary and leadership in charge in Africa, supporting it and make sure that it can articulate an agenda that will drive these countries into transformation. We'll focus on infrastructure investment, innovative solutions for financing infrastructure, dealing with all the bottlenecks, given the wonderful opportunity we have globally right now, which is excess liquidity in Europe.
Free money.
It's free money,
free.
Which is looking for yield.
Yeah.
And Africa is a source of that, of that yield. So we'll focus on the role of the private sector in structural transformation in many different ways. Right. We'll focus on financial inclusion as a way of making sure that the bulk of the population is included in infrastructure. We'll focus on the demographic dividend. 1 billion extra people, 1 billion of opportunities. How can we build human capacity in a way that we can harness all our potential in Africa? We'll focus on natural resources as a potential financier of structural transformation.
Right.
A huge opportunity in natural resources. It is a way to diversify the economies. All of those issues will be covered. The governors at the meeting, which is the ministers of finance, who represent the shareholders of the bank, will also focus on the whole issue of structural transformation and natural resource management. All natural resources, not just extractives.
Right.
It's about fisheries, it's about forests, it's about many other, exhaustible natural resources and inexhaustible natural resources. How to harness all of these is critical to moving Africa.